They said the field was safe in daylight. The grass grew in patient waves, bees worked the thistles, and the wind smoothed the earth as if nothing had ever been buried there. It was the nights that mattered. One night in particular, when the ground remembered a shape and tried to become it again. He had heard about the church long before he ever saw the place. Not a ruin, they said, not stones and bones. A whole church swallowed by soil after a flood, or a quake, or a mistake in the way people pray. Once a year, never on the same date, only around the same season, the field rose like a blister. Wood that should have rotted tasted air. A bell with no rope began to ring, very soft, as if underwater. He went at sunset with a flashlight and a pocket of coarse salt his grandmother would have approved of, though she'd told him never to go. The path cut through dry weeds, burrs catching at his socks like small needy hands. The air was the warm kind that promised rain and then forgets. There was a smell of iron and wild mint, and under it a sweetness like apples past their time. At the center of the field, the grass lay flat in a perfect oval, the way cattle bed down, but nothing had done this. The soil looked combed. He stood on the rim and felt a hollow beneath him, drum skin taut. No bell, no blister underfoot. Only that patient hush fields have when they're listening back. He waited. The sky diluted. A moth rattled against his shirt, then let go. When he finally heard the first bell, it was not like a bell at all, more like a spoon around a crystal glass, a sound too clean to be metal. He told himself it was a farmhouse, a cow yoke, anything ordinary. The second tone was lower and near. It moved the air, and the hair on his arms climbed like grass in wind. The earth changed, not quickly. In small, careful translations, seams became planks. Dark soaked into lighter dark as if something breathed, and the soil went thin. A line appeared, then a hinge, then a door the color of wet bark. He watched it find itself out of dirt, watched the frame settle. The wood had that swollen look of long water. Between the door and the frame, a thread of black showed, and something colder than the night pushed through that small line, as if the dark inside the church had its own weather. He could have run. He told his legs to be clever, and they refused. The third bell, if it was a bell, stroked the air, and the sound left a taste like a coin on the tongue. The door unlatched, very polite. Inside, the air was not cold. It was the temperature of breath you don't want to waste. His beam edged past the doorway and found pews slumped like old backs. Candles stood on the altar, their wicks thread-thin and white as scars. He stepped in, and the floor gave a little like a raft. The dust didn't rise. There was no dust at all. The church was simple, a nave, an altar, a cramped side chapel with a stone bowl that might have been a font. There was a cross, but not the kind he recognized, no body, no figure. Just two pieces of wood scorched black, bound with a braid of something pale. It could have been reeds. It could have been hair. He felt seen, not watched. Seen, the way you sometimes stand in front of glass at night in the room. Behind you trades your face for what it remembers. He kept moving because to stop was to be measured. The floor asked nothing of him. The smell was not damp. It was clean, like linen that had seen fire and forgiven it. On the altar lay a book. No dust, no web. The leather was the color of storm water, the corners rounded down to softness by hands. He did not want to touch it. He touched it. The leather warmed. The cover opened. There were names, not written in the same hand, not in the same century. There were tight, careful letters and panicked, jagged ones. Some had signed with symbols. Some had signed with little pictures, a sheaf, a bird, a star that wasn't a star. He flipped until he found blankness and found instead a damp page, as if a thumb had just left it. The margins bore prints, finger length, not finger shape. He pretended they were smudges. He didn't notice the bell until the book asked, in the way an empty line asks, if he was going to put something down. The salt in his pocket felt suddenly heavy. He told himself he was not a child. He told the church he was only visiting. He borrowed the small pencil tucked in the binding and wrote his name. The graphite caught. The paper drank it. For a moment it looked too dark, as if it had sunk deeper than the page. He closed the book and set the pencil back and felt the floor tilt, just a degree. The candles shivered without flame. His beam landed on the side chapel and the stone bowl held. Water that was not a reflection of his light, but of something else, summer noon, perhaps, or a sky he was not under. He leaned and saw clouds that didn't match. He straightened and told himself not to look again. When the fourth bell came, it was not inside his ear, but inside his ribs. It thinned him. His hands learned to feel each bone. He understood, the way a dream explains itself, that the church did not return to be visited. It returned to collect. He turned for the door then, at last remembering what running was. The night beyond was ordinary. Crickets, a thin road of stars, the faint town glow. That normalcy was obscene. The doorway seemed narrower than it had been. He stepped out and felt the ground give in the good way that dry earth gives. Not like a raft, not like a lung. He did not look back while the wood traded itself for soil. He listened to the last bell, which was not any note at all, but the sound of something closing in a language that needs time to be heard. The field settled. The oval of laid-down grass looked like a bed that had held enormous sleep. He went home. He put the salt by the door and the flashlight on the table and the book in his head, where books go when you try to pretend they're only there. He washed his hands and could not get rid of the feeling that the water was too clean and too interested. The next morning, he woke before his alarm to a sound that was not the bell but would someday be the bell if given enough space. He told himself it was the neighbor's pipes. He told himself it was air in the vents. He dressed and made coffee that tasted like the night had stayed awake while he slept. When he opened his phone, there was a notification he did not remember setting. A calendar reminder with no date, only a note that read, "Field." He deleted it. It came back. He powered off the phone, and the reflection on the black screen showed a room behind him. That matched his room, except that the window was on the wrong wall. He turned and the room was as it was. If he threw away the phone, it would not change. The fact that a line of graphite lived somewhere, under the ground in a book that kept the names of people who had walked into a place that should not have been there. On the third day, he found a taste in his mouth like rain in old tin. On the fourth day, the mirror offered him a second heartbeat, and then politely handed it back. On the week mark, he dreamed of a dresser drawer filled with dry leaves and woke with a leaf in his hand, brittle and pale and shaped like a tongue. He did not go back to the field. He avoided the road that led there and the town market, and the church that was not that church. He salted his threshold and changed the batteries in the flashlight and placed it in the freezer, because the cold felt like a promise. He told himself he had not been chosen. He had chosen. It helped until it didn't. He understood finally what the book had been. It was not a registry. It was a receipt. When the season turned again and the first moths began to fold themselves against porch lights, he woke to the fifth bell. Not a sound. A memory of a sound returning to claim itself. His name stirred in the place where he kept it. The night leaned at his window the way water leans at a shore. He stood and his feet knew the path more surely than the map in his head. He did not take the flashlight. He left the salt. He closed the door behind him so the house would think he might come home. He walked toward the field, and the field, patient as a held breath, rose to meet him.